Welcome to the Waiting Warriors podcast. As loved ones of first responders and military personnel, we often face life situations and challenges that many others don't experience. And while each of us and our experiences are unique, together we can learn from one another and become stronger in this journey of life. Now let's step out of mediocrity. It's time to thrive. Hi, Waiting Warriors. Welcome to another episode. I'm excited for this one. Gems, I've been like, I guess it would be online stalking, right? But that's like what we're supposed to do on Instagram, right?
That's how you make friends, isn't it?
That's true. That's how we make friends. But I've followed Gems for a while. She owns her own project management consultancy and is a military spouse for about 3 years. And as you maybe noticed from when she piped in there, she is actually from the UK. So welcome, Gems.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So how did you meet your husband? I've been wanting to ask you because like soldiers, at least I don't think of soldiers going to the UK. So how did you guys?
No. So I love telling this story. So before I came to America, when I was 26, I actually left the UK. I moved to Abu Dhabi in the Middle East. And I was a project manager for New York University out there. And so I lived there for about 5 years. And in October of 2016, I went out with a friend. We just finished like a 10K run. We went out celebrating. And I bumped into a very tall gentleman with a questionable moustache in an Irish bar. So we just hit it off that evening. We spent about 5 hours chatting. And then obviously typical military style, he was gone, I think the next day or day after. So we didn't actually see each other again after that evening. But we'd exchanged emails, and I think it was just emails. And he made the mistake of saying, hey, if you ever want to come visit America, you should let me know. So I was like, oh, cool. So we just kind of struck up an online, WhatsApp and Skypes and got to know each other. Mm-hmm. And so then in January of 2017, I was in the UK for Christmas. So just sort of thought I'd hop on a plane and, pop over to Seattle for a week. So we spent some time getting to know each other, exploring the area. And it was, by the end of that week, it was a question of, well, we either really try and make this work or, it's going to be pretty challenging for the next, year or whatever. So I decided to go back to the UAE, and I actually handed in my notice at my job with a view to kind of taking a sabbatical for a year. So I ended up leaving the UAE in May, and then came over to America for the summer of 2017. So I was here for about 3 months in 2017, and then went back home and then came back again. And then in November of 2017, we got engaged. And then in December of 2017, we got married. So we definitely combined about 5 years worth of dating into about 8 months.
That's the way you do it.
Exactly.
Just get to the point, figure out if you're going to be together or not.
I think that's it. When there's no point in, for me anyway, I'm like, if just, get it done and kind of figure stuff out along the way. I don't think there's any point, especially, we weren't young when we met each other. So I think we were both at the point of, I'm either going to be with you because this is something serious, or there's no point in doing it. And we were definitely both in the, we want to make this happen phase. So it worked out for the best.
Yeah. So you guys did a lot of long distance though.
Yes. Yeah. That first 6 months, so pretty much January to June was long distance. I think the time difference was something like 11 hours or something crazy. Yeah. He was on a trip where we literally saw each other for one evening when he was on a trip in Abu Dhabi. So we had dinner in the middle of the UAE, which was crazy.
Yeah.
And then he came to the UK in April to meet family and friends and stuff as well. So, yeah, we made it work. It was tough, but we made it work.
Did your family think you were crazy?
I mean, yes, but that kind of thing isn't really out of the ordinary for me. Like when I was 26, I was like, oh, by the way, I'm moving to the Middle East. All right, bye.
That's true, yeah.
They just kind of go with it. I think there was definitely probably some nervousness and some hesitation. My dad's in the military, so when I mentioned that my husband my boyfriend at the time was a military member, he was like, okay, that's there was that kind of level of trust, but there was definitely some hesitation from everybody, including myself. I'm flying over to America to meet a complete stranger, but something just said, it's going to be fine and it's the right thing to do. So
Yeah. You're trusting your gut at that point.
yeah.
That's awesome. I love that story.
Thanks.
So what has the process been like though to come and be in America? Because like, did you have to change your citizenship, or is that immigration? Like, what is that? Just a messy process, or was it simple because he was in the military?
I think it's easier because he's in the military, but it's definitely, we're still sort of going through the process now. So the way that we had done it, because we got married in the States, they call it a change of status. So we had to apply to change my status and basically explain that, I didn't come over with the intentions of getting married. It's a genuine relationship. So there was quite an invasive process of, proving our relationship to people who we had no idea who they were.
Really?
Yeah. And then, so, it was photos. We had to send, WhatsApp conversations and how long it had been going on for. And we had affidavits from various family members and things to prove the genuineness, I suppose, of our relationship. And then, so we started the process in Seattle and then we moved to Alabama because we're currently here for flight school. And so then you have to actually go in for an interview. So once you've prepared all your paperwork, you then go in for an interview, again, just for them to question you about certain things and get a bit of history on the two of you. And that was quite, it was really quick. And at the end of it, we were like, oh, that was fine. But actually at the time, it was quite nerve wracking because some of the questions they ask you then question your answer and you're like, wait, am I a good person? Or so that was definitely interesting. But so at the end of that, I get basically what's called a 2-year conditional permanent resident card. So I'm what's called a resident alien. So I can live here for 2 years. And then at the end of 2 years, I apply to have the conditions removed. So then I'm here unconditionally. And then I think after 10 years is the normal process. But as a military spouse, I think you can speed that up. I can then apply for citizenship or dual citizenship, depending on what we want to do. But that's only one way that people do it. There's, you can come in on fiancé visas, or you can get married in your home country and then apply to come over. So there's different ways of doing it. It's just what works best with your situation, finances, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Has that made things like messier or harder when he's gone? Like, I know it's a pain just as a spouse. You have to have all the what's all that legal stuff, and I can't think of the word, but
the POA and things.
Yeah, POAs and stuff, like even just to have something changed in your house or whatever, and it's such a pain. Right. Like, is that made more difficult, or is it just you're married, so it's still the same?
I mean, I think now that we're married, everything's very much the same. We have all of the same provisions in place, and then being a military spouse as well does help with certain things. Because I got my ID pretty quickly after we'd got married. So those kinds of things are made a lot easier. But certainly when we were dating and in the very early stages, as we were going through the paperwork, there was a lot that was really I wasn't able to work legally. You're not allowed to work until you have approval to find work. And then a lot of the times he was gone. So I would be like in this relatively new town by myself, no work. I had a couple of friends I worked out quite a lot, but there's only so much working out you could do in a day. Yeah. So that was quite challenging, doing that on my own. But again,
especially if you're going from what you were doing, like you weren't just working casually, like you were in the Middle East, you were obviously a big go-getter and somebody who likes to stay busy.
Yeah, that was, for me, career was always a huge part of who I was. So coming over here and, originally it was like, oh, I'll take a 3 to 6 month sabbatical and then I'll find work and do that. And then the reality sets in and you're like, well, I've either got to start from scratch in a new country with not people who don't understand, but, qualifications from certain countries don't translate as easily, or they don't, understanding of the kind of the job roles and I had to rewrite my, what we call a CV into a resume with different language, and just going through all of that learning process and essentially starting again, was quite challenging, hence why I kind of ended up starting my own business. But, that was definitely a big, that was a shift for me, and I struggled, I definitely lost a lot of confidence and went to some dark places at some points, but you come out the other side and you realize it's all worth it. But at the time, it's a really challenging situation.
Yeah. What was the biggest cultural adjustment for you?
For me, honestly, and I know this sounds crazy, but a lot of it is the sense of humor side of things. Like, I consider myself quite a humorous person. And in the UK, you kind of have that sort of banter and that similar sense of humor with a lot of people, and it's quite a dry sense of humor, and that doesn't necessarily translate so well over here. And so I found that, at the start I was offending people more than I was making people laugh. And it just took a while for me to kind of, and I know it sounds crazy, but people start looking at you weird and thinking, do we really want to spend time with this person? And, it's getting used to those nuances that you just think that America is a bigger version of the UK, but there's so many differences that you really have to pay attention to and be aware of when you're trying to integrate into a new community and make new friends and meet new people.
Yeah. I laugh because my husband, is like super similar. Like, he is super witty and would just make everything a joke. But every time we move, it like takes him a year to figure out who he can do that with, and
Right.
who just doesn't understand.
Yeah, it just doesn't work.
It's a process. So what has been harder to adjust though, like into military life or to USA nuances in life?
I would probably say the military. So, I mean, like I said, I came from a military background. My dad was, he was a pilot in the UK, so I knew what that kind of meant, but I saw it from a child's perspective. I was at boarding school, so I didn't deal with a lot of the moves and the new friends. Like, I had some level of consistency. So I think coming into a new country and then dealing with the military spouse community, but then also just some of the frustrations of the military in general. Like, we had orders to come here, I think it was in June of 2019, and then we get a phone call and it's, oh, actually you're moving in January. And then we're moving in, I think, 2 months time. And, yesterday we found out where we're actually going. So I think there's a lot of small things that just make life a lot more frustrating and a lot harder to just get, it's the whole, you make a plan but then you have to make another plan, and then you make about 15 plans, and why did you just end up back at the first place? But that's been quite challenging, because I'm somebody who loves to plan and I love to know, what's happening A to B to C to D. And then as soon as someone else comes in and says, well, actually that's not what's happening, that's been quite an adjustment to get used to. And then just the whole, as you get older, making friends can be more challenging, and finding the right kind of military spouses that you want to be around and who are, you're rooting for and who are rooting for you. I think that's been challenging to navigate. And I imagine it's something that everybody goes through and will continue to go through.
Yeah. So how have you adapted and adjusted to that? Because I feel like, at least from following you online, like, it seems like you have adjusted and you're positive about this life and all the changes that you've been through. But then I know a lot of spouses who aren't. And it's not that you don't like talk about or acknowledge the hard things, but like you've seemed like you've adapted well, whereas I know a lot of spouses don't.
And I think a lot of it is just attitude. I think the way you see things dictates how things actually will roll out at the end of the day. If you can be positive about, I don't know where we're going, but wherever we go is going to be a new adventure, and there's new opportunities, and there's going to be new things to explore. And, you kind of have to find a way to thrive off the last minute. Okay, we're not going here, we're going here now. And, the people who love to, I love to troubleshoot. I love a bit of conflict resolution, and something comes up and I have a challenge to fix. I love that kind of thing. And for me, that's just something that's innate, but there is a way that you can learn to love that kind of thing as well. And I think just approaching everything with a positive and a joyful attitude, and thinking things can always be worse. There are people far more worse off than we are. And what we've always got to remember is, we're going somewhere where our spouses will have a job, we will have a home to live in. There's provisions made to look after the families. And I think if we can always keep the benefits and the good things at the forefront of our minds, then it just makes dealing with the challenges that little bit easier.
Yeah.
And you learn so much about yourself by going through each and every one of them anyway. So it's just more stuff to add in your toolbox at the end of the day.
I like that. It's just more stuff to add to your toolbox, because that totally is a completely different mindset and like a paradigm shift from how most spouses are thinking. They're thinking, oh, we have to do this again. And like, almost going into the victim, as opposed to, now I get to learn and I get to
Exactly.
get little tools. I like that. That's a good one. So from your point of view, can you think of like a few do's and don'ts for when people meet not only new military spouses, but ones from different countries? You
So
might
I
get a little
think
feisty.
the big do is, ask them about where they come from. I love talking about England. I love talking about the UK. If anybody wants to go on a trip there, it's because you're so passionate about where you come from. If somebody shows interest in where you're from and what you like to do or what there is to do there, showing that interest and genuinely wanting to know about where they've come from, it's just a really good way to connect with someone. But at the same time, and I know I have friends that do this and I do laugh, but just don't try to emulate somebody's accent because as much as you think it's really cute and funny, it's half the time it's not. And you can't, you have to laugh. And like I say, I have some really good girlfriends that it is a joke and, I enjoy it. But if you've just met somebody for the first time and somebody tries to do like an Oliver Twist accent, I'm just like, we're not at that level yet, and it's kind of offensive.
Yeah.
And I'm from England, and American to English is not that bad, but I just think trying to do it with a completely different accent is it's a recipe for a disaster. So I think show interest, but stop when it comes to trying to copy accents.
Don't let the interest go that far until you are like 6 months into the relationship and at a girls' night and just being goofy.
Yeah.
Got it. Are there any more don'ts? Like, I don't want to like be talking rudely about other people, but at the same time, I know so many people would never want to offend, but they just don't know. You know what I mean? But whereas you have insight to that. Have there been any instances or no?
I mean, I try not to get offended easily because I think most of the time it comes from a genuine place of interest and trying to connect with people. But I think a lot of don't assume anything about anybody. Like, don't assume that because I've come here, it means that I don't like being in the UK or I don't miss my family or, I didn't come here to escape England or I don't think that either one is better than the other. I just think don't ever make assumptions about anybody. Like, you never know someone's story until they've told it to you. You never know someone's reason for being here. And then this is a big one, I know, for all military spouses, but if someone's having a bad day, don't just say, well, that's the military, you knew what you were getting into. Like, you never know what anyone's getting into. And I think coming over as a foreign spouse, it can be even more, I guess, a shock to the system because you know what you know at home, whether you're in the military or not. And I think coming over to a brand new system, a brand new country, a brand new language for a lot of people, just making assumptions and telling people that they kind of knew what they got into is a surefire way to, get someone's heckles up and upset people. I think just always approach everyone with an open mind and show interest and ask genuine, questions rather than making any kind of assumptions. And that works both ways. We can't come over here and assume certain things about, you're from America, life must be so much easier for you. Like, of course, that's not the case. So that kind of thing works both ways.
Yeah. I like that a lot because first of all, that people say, well, you knew what you were getting into is just so frustrating. Like, I just cringe every time I hear that somebody has been told that because, like, that is the dumbest thing. There's no way you could really know or understand everything that you were getting into. But also, like, that's an unempathetic answer. Like, why can't we just be there for each other and sympathize? And whether you think that their heart is hard, it doesn't mean it's not hard for them. Like,
exactly.
And we're not going to be able to support each other. We're not going to be able to love each other. We're not going to be there for each other if we can't just listen and let people be sad for a second. Like, we don't have to dismiss their feelings,
Yeah, I think that's it. Getting on the same level as someone and letting them be, if they're a bit down, like helping them get out of it, but don't just dismiss what they're saying or what they're feeling.
Yeah. And I think, I know a lot of people mean it as like just being a positive go-getter, but that doesn't mean we have to dismiss the feelings. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So what has been your key to thriving that you want to share with your fellow waiting warriors?
I think the biggest one is definitely finding your tribe, finding your people. And that's not always going to happen straight away. So don't give up. You know, you'll move somewhere and you'll go to all the events and you'll expect to find your best friend within 5 minutes, but it doesn't work like that. So I think, being not persistent to the point where you're the weirdo that wants to be everyone's friend, but trying everything that you can to find your people. And in the same way, what are your hobbies? How can you interact those hobbies with finding the right people? Because once you have those friends, those people that you can go to, that's what's going to make your life that much more fulfilling. And, maybe it's one or two people. It doesn't have to be, you see massive groups of friends getting together. But if you're the kind of person that enjoys a bit of solitary time and you just want a couple of friends, then be okay with that. Don't feel that there's a certain amount of friends that you have to have in order to be happy or, to be whatever it is. So I think just finding your tribe and being comfortable within yourself.
Yeah. It almost sounds like we need to have a self-awareness of what kind of friends we want. You know what I mean? Like every personality is different, and some people thrive on having big groups, and some people thrive on just having that like one or two personal relationships. But then like we see the big groups and they're like, oh, well, I guess I should, I should have that group. But yeah, that is kind of silly that we do that. But
I think that's where social media comes in as well. Like you say, it's great to find people and connect with people, but it's also where we then start to compare, what we're doing with everyone else. And we, are we military spousing right? Like, am I doing the right thing? And I think it's important to, if you're using social media, to set boundaries so that you're not using it to bring yourself down, but you're using it for the right reasons, to inspire others or to connect with people, but not to say, oh, am I doing this wrong? Or how can I be better? Or
yeah. So you mentioned though, with finding your tribe, that you like how you can intermingle your hobbies and connect with people that way. I'm curious, like when you're meeting people, are you talking like, hey, what does your husband do? Or where did you come from? Are you asking those questions, or are you asking different kind of questions? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think where have you come from? What does your husband do? It's a good icebreaker, and it's a conversation that everybody has. But, I really want to know from people, like, what is it that you like doing? Like, do you work out? Do you go to church? Do you read? Do you have any hobbies? Like that kind of thing. Because then I think as soon as you find somebody who has the same interests as you, that's something else that you can connect over. Because as much as I love what my husband does and I'm proud of what he does, I don't want every gathering I go to be about what they're doing at work. Like, I want to know about you. I want to find out what your interests are, what makes you tick, what do you need help with, how can I help you do that, and vice versa. You want people who you're going to bring them up just as much as they're going to bring you up. And I think you have to ask those deeper questions more than just how long have you been here, where did you come from before, what does your husband do? Because as I say, that's great and it's helpful to get a conversation started, but to find your people, you need to really understand what makes them tick, what do they love, and how do you, how can you complement one another?
I really like that. And I would venture to say that is a huge part of why you've adjusted so well, because you haven't just connected like through military with people. You've connected on more of a human basis, which I think a lot of us military spouses are missing, because we just talk about the military and we talk about what our husband's doing, but then it quickly turns into that's like consuming our life.
Yeah.
And that spirals and branches off into a whole bunch of other problems. But then when you have friends where you're actually talking and you're actually connecting, then your life becomes so much more than the military. And I think then that's easier to deal with the crazy, 2-week windows of now we're moving to this place as opposed to this place.
Exactly.
Your huge change. Yeah. That I just had like a light bulb in my head. So thank you. I hadn't thought of that before, but that's why I love this podcast so much, because yes, I've been a military spouse for almost 8 years now. And you would think I have all the answers or whatever, but we don't. That's why talking to each other, we get those golden nuggets. Thank you. I'm like, oh, I need to think of different questions to ask. We have a little women's gathering for our church congregation. I'm like, what can I ask that I haven't asked yet? Because I always just ask, what's your husband up to? And what does that mean for you?
When you never know what you come across, you don't know what you don't know about somebody, and there could be some of the most interesting people in there, just nobody's ever asked them, anything about them.
Yeah. That's how I'm gonna approach a room now. Like, okay,
Yeah.
what is the most interesting thing? Because especially when you think about it, it's like we all did super random, funny, interesting, dumb things in our like the 10 years before we became military spouses, right?
Hmm.
Like the chunk of life. And yet we're only thinking that we're going to talk about like this last however short chunk of time. Like, oh, you're missing out so much on.
Yeah, because you never know where people have come from, what they've done, who they were before they joined this, crazy, beautiful lifestyle that you just don't know who you're talking to until you ask the question.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm like so excited. Is that, I'm such a dork, but it's like, oh, that's a really good tip, I feel like, for really thriving. Cause people say like, find your tribe, but I like the way that you do that. You do it at such a deeper level and a more of a human level as opposed to like a military
Right.
spouse level.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm just over here thinking,
I love it.
just, the cogs in my head are turning. Thank you. I'm very happy right now. I hope
Aw.
everybody listening, you should be thinking of how you can do this. And if you are doing this, this is another good tip that I've learned is like when you hear things like this, even if you're doing it, don't just think, oh, I do it, but think, hey, like what's one thing that we could do better about it, or pat yourself on the back. Good job. You're doing it. Either way.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
of
I'm
course.
I'm gonna sit and think all day what I prep for tonight. So thank you again for coming on the show. If someone wants to connect with you or reach out, maybe there's a fellow UK immigrant military spouse out there, or just people who want to hear more about you and love what you have to share, what's a good way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I would love to connect with anyone. If you just search Gems Collins on Facebook and Instagram, you will find me. LinkedIn as well. So yeah, really simple. Gems Collins, and profiles are open. So yeah, I would love to connect if anyone has any questions or like you say, wants to share anything. Then I'm happy to help.
Awesome. You're awesome, Gems. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And you waiting warriors out there, I want to put out a little challenge because I'm starting to do this and I really like it. I want you to think of a new question you can ask people when you meet them. One that's kind of in my brain right now is like, what excites you right now? What's getting you excited right now? Because then if they're a working mom, then they can talk about their work. If they're an at home, staying at home and working on projects, then they can talk about their hobby. If they are super into church, they can talk about church, but it also gets that like light in their eyes. So I want you to think of a question, and then if you are so bold to share it on Instagram or Facebook and then tag Gems and I so we can see it and then we can keep this conversation going. I think that would help.
I love that.
Help our military spouses up here. And everybody else, just have a great week. Thanks again, Gems.
Thank you for having me.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Countdowns and Cupcakes. Do you want your next care package to be the easiest one ever? Then leave the decorating to Countdowns and Cupcakes and their pre-decorated flap sets. They are perfect for every and any occasion. Shop at countdownsandcupcakes.com.